A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my Weird Prompts. We are coming to you, as always, from our home studio here in Jerusalem. I am Corn Poppleberry, and sitting across from me is my brother, looking particularly caffeinated today. Herman, I think that is the fourth espresso cup I have seen on your desk in the last hour.
Herman Poppleberry at your service. And yes, Corn, you are counting correctly. I have had about 4 espressos because the news cycle today is absolutely unreal. We usually have our housemate Daniel send us a prompt to kick things off, but today we actually decided to pivot. We picked today's topic ourselves because of the massive breaking news that just hit the wires. It is one of those moments where history feels like it is moving at 100 miles an hour.
It really is a wild one. For those who haven't seen the headlines yet, today, March 6, 2026, a CNN news crew officially entered Tehran. They are the first American news team allowed into Iran since this current conflict really spiraled out of control. It is a staggering development when you think about the geopolitical reality right now. We are talking about a country that is effectively in a state of undeclared war with the United States, yet they are opening the doors to one of the biggest Western media outlets.
It is borderline surreal. Corn, I mean, think about the context. We have active kinetic engagements happening across multiple theaters in the region. The sanctions are at an all-time high, and the rhetoric from both Washington and Tehran has never been more bellicose. And yet, here is a crew of American citizens with cameras, satellite uplinks, and press vests walking through the heart of the enemy capital. It feels like something out of a Cold War spy novel, but it is happening in real time on our television screens.
It raises so many questions about what is actually happening behind the scenes. You don't just buy a plane ticket to Tehran right now. This involves layers of back-channel diplomacy, Swiss intermediaries, and probably some very specific guarantees from the highest levels of the Iranian government. But more importantly for our discussion today, it involves an incredible amount of risk management and tradecraft. I wanted to really dig into the mechanics of this with you, Herman. How does a crew like that actually operate without being immediately compromised or, frankly, taken hostage?
That is the heart of it. This isn't just journalism in the traditional sense. When you are operating in a state-monitored, hostile environment like Iran, journalism becomes a high-stakes exercise in counterintelligence. Every move you make, every word you speak, and every byte of data you transmit is being scrutinized by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, and their specialized cyber units. This is what we call the gray zones of access. You have permission to be there, but that permission is a tool of state propaganda. You are a guest, but you are also a high-value target.
So let's frame this for the listeners. We are talking about the tradecraft of conflict journalism in enemy states. We are going to look at the surveillance, the operational security, the role of local fixers, and that impossible balancing act between getting the story and staying alive. Because let's be honest, in a place like Tehran right now, the line between a reporter and a spy is whatever the local regime decides. It is on any given day.
And we should probably start by defining the shift we have seen in the last few decades. We have moved away from the embedded journalism model we saw in the early 2000s, where you were protected by a platoon of soldiers, to this new era of hostile environment reporting. In this scenario, your only protection is your press pass and your own wits. You are essentially operating in a clandestine adjacent manner while being highly visible.
It reminds me of what we discussed back in episode 944 about the architecture of information. When a regime lets you in, they aren't doing it out of a sudden love for the First Amendment. They have a narrative they want to project. They want to show the world that they are resilient, that the American sanctions are failing, or that the civilian population is united. So the journalists have to navigate being a conduit for that narrative, while trying to find the actual truth hidden underneath it.
Right? And to do that, you need a level of technical security that would make most corporate IT departments weep. Let's move from the digital security of the crew to the physical reality of their handlers. But first, let's talk about digital hygiene. This is where these crews are most vulnerable. If you are a CNN producer landing in Tehran today, you are not bringing your personal iPhone. You aren't even bringing your standard work laptop that you use in Atlanta or Washington.
I assume everything is burner hardware, right? Completely clean devices that have never touched a sensitive network.
Not just clean, but isolated. The standard protocol for high-threat environments involves what we call hardware parity and air gapping. You take a laptop that has been stripped of its internal wireless cards. No Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi, no cellular modem. If you want to get data off that machine, it happens via a physical cable to a separate dedicated transmission device. This prevents the local intelligence services from using zero-day exploits to turn your own microphone or camera against you while you are sitting in your hotel room. There is a concept called the evil Maid attack, where someone enters your room while you are at dinner and installs a hardware keylogger or a firmware rootkit. If your device is air-gapped, that risk is significantly mitigated.
That sounds intense, but it makes sense. I mean, the Iranian cyber capabilities are world-class. We know they have sophisticated IMS eye catchers, those fake cell towers that can intercept mobile traffic. If you are walking around with a standard phone, they know exactly who you are talking to and where you are within about 10 meters.
Oh, they definitely do. In fact, the IRGC has a dedicated unit specifically tasked with monitoring foreign media equipment. They look at the metadata. They look at the transmission frequencies. If you are using a satellite uplink, they are triangulating that position instantly. So the crew has to use encrypted communication protocols, things like Signal or Pretty Good Privacy for emails, but even that is risky.
Wait, why is Signal risky? I thought that was the gold standard for encrypted messaging.
The encryption is solid, but the metadata is the killer. In a country where the state controls the entire telecommunications infrastructure, they might not be able to read the content of your message, but they can see that IP address A is talking to IP address B at 2 o'clock in the morning. If IP address B belongs to a known dissident or a local source, you have just signed that person's death warrant, or at the very least, their arrest warrant. This is why many crews use stealth pings or timed bursts of data to minimize their digital footprint.
That is a heavy realization. It's not just about the journalist's safety, it's about the safety of everyone they touch. Which brings us to the most critical and often most vulnerable part of this whole operation, the local fixer. While the tech is fascinating, the human cost is the real story here. Let's pivot to the ethics of the fixer relationship.
The fixers are the unsung heroes and the most at-risk individuals in this entire equation. For those who don't know, a fixer is a local person, usually a journalist or a professional translator, who knows the terrain, knows the language, and has the connections to get the crew where they need to go. In Tehran, a fixer is your lifeline. They tell you which street is safe to film on, and which one will get you arrested by the Basiji militia. But they are also in an impossible position. They are Iranian citizens. They have families there. The regime knows exactly who they are working for.
I imagine the pressure on them to act as informants must be astronomical. If the IRGC comes to a fixer and says, "Tell us who the Americans talked to today or your brother loses his business license," what choice do they have?
It is a constant shadow. Every foreign news crew has to assume that their fixer is being questioned, or at the very least, that their fixer knows they are being watched. There is a saying in conflict journalism, your fixer is your best friend until the secret police show up, and then they are just another person trying to survive. You have to build a relationship of deep trust, but you also have to be incredibly careful about what you share with them. You never tell a fixer your full schedule for the next day. You never give them the names of sensitive sources until the very last second.
It's a tragic dynamic. You're working side by side in high-stress situations, but there is this fundamental wall of state-mandated suspicion. It reminds me of the human element we talked about in episode 895. No matter how much high-tech surveillance you have, the human source is still the most valuable and the most fragile part of the intelligence chain.
And the IRGC uses that. They will use physical surveillance, what we call tailing, to see who the fixer meets with when the American crew is back at the hotel. They might use a honeypot approach or financial pressure. So the journalists have to develop their own counter-surveillance techniques.
Like what? I mean, these are reporters, not Mossad agents. How much tradecraft are they actually trained in?
More than you might think, Korn. Most major news organizations now put their conflict reporters through hostile environment and first aid training, or HEFAT. It is a grueling week-long course that covers everything from stopping a major bleed to identifying if you are being followed. They learn things like the star pattern for foot surveillance, where multiple agents move in a coordinated way to stay out of your line of sight. They learn to look for the tells, like the same car appearing in your rearview mirror after 3 random turns, or someone who is dressed for a business meeting but is standing around a park for 2 hours.
Does that actually work in a city like Tehran? I mean, if the state wants to follow you, they have thousands of eyes. They have cameras on every corner. It seems like trying to hide from the ocean while you're swimming in it.
You're right, you can't really hide. So the goal shifts from being invisible to being predictable. If you act like a normal journalist, if you stay within the bounds of your government-issued press pass, they might give you some breathing room. The danger comes when you try to slip the leash. If you suddenly disappear from your tail's sight for 20 minutes, that is when the alarm bells go off. That is when people start getting detained. It is a game of managed transparency.
That leads into the balancing act we wanted to discuss. The tension between getting the real story and staying alive. If you only film what the government wants you to see, you're just a propaganda tool. But if you try to film the bread lines, or the protests, or the missile launch sites, you're a spy. How do they navigate that?
It's a constant negotiation. Sometimes it's about what you don't say. You might see something incredible, maybe a group of women protesting in a side alley. But you know that if you broadcast it live, you'll be on a plane home or in a cell within the hour, so you bank that information. You wait until you are out of the country to tell the full story. But that raises ethical questions. Is it still news if you wait 3 weeks to report it? Does the delay compromise the impact?
It's a compromise. But I think most people would agree that a delayed story is better than no story, and a dead crew. Look at the historical context here. We can go back to the 1979 hostage crisis. That is the baseline for how the Iranian regime views Americans on their soil. They see them as bargaining chips.
They absolutely do. Hostage diplomacy is a core part of their foreign policy. We've seen it time and again with academics, dual nationals, and journalists. Remember Jason Rezaian from the Washington Post? He spent 544 days in Evin prison. He was a legitimate journalist, but the regime used him as a pawn in the nuclear negotiations. They accused him of collecting confidential information and spreading propaganda against the establishment. Those are the catch-all charges they use to turn a reporter into a prisoner.
And that was during a time of relative peace compared to today. Now, in 2026, with the US and Iran in an active conflict, the stakes are so much higher. Every person on that CNN crew is a potential multi-billion-dollar asset for the Iranian government. If they can catch a producer with a suspicious file on their laptop, they have a hostage. They can trade for frozen assets or a ceasefire.
Which is why the logistics of their entry must have been handled at the highest levels of the State Department and the Iranian Foreign Ministry. There were likely guarantees made, perhaps even a specific list of what is off limits. But as we know, the Foreign Ministry in Iran doesn't always have control over what the IRGC does. There is a deep state within Iran that operates by its own rules. The IRGC might decide to ignore the Foreign Ministry's guarantees if they feel the journalists are getting too close to a sensitive military site.
That is a great point. You might have a piece of paper from the president of Iran saying you are safe, but if a local IRGC commander decides you looked at a military base too closely, that paper is just trash. It's that internal friction within the Iranian power structure that makes it so unpredictable for journalists.
It really does. And it's not just physical safety we have to worry about, it's the integrity of the information itself. When a crew is under that much pressure, self-censorship becomes an unconscious survival mechanism. You start to frame your questions differently. You avoid certain topics not because you were told to, but because you want to make sure your cameraman gets home to his kids. The regime doesn't have to tell you what to say if they can make you afraid to say anything else.
But let's look at the other side of this. Why is CNN there? Why take the risk? Is the marginal gain of being on the ground in Tehran worth the potential catastrophe if something goes wrong?
From a purely journalistic perspective, being there allows you to capture the atmosphere, the mood of the people, the small details that satellite imagery can't show. You can see the price of eggs in the market. You can see the exhaustion on people's faces. Those are the human elements that tell the real story of how the conflict is affecting the population. But there is also a secondary effect that I find fascinating. The footage these crews capture is analyzed by Western intelligence agencies as a secondary source.
Wait, you mean the CIA is watching CNN and B-roll to gather intel?
Oh, absolutely. It's open source intelligence, OSINT, at its most basic level. When CNN broadcasts a shot of a street in Tehran, you can bet there are analysts at the Pentagon and the CIA looking at the background. They are looking at the types of vehicles, the fuel prices on the signs, the construction projects, the military hardware moving in the distance. They use shadow analysis to determine the exact time of day and location of a shot. A news crew is essentially a mobile, high-definition sensor platform that the enemy has voluntarily allowed into their capital.
It's a game of chess. The Iranians know this, of course, which is why they try to stage manage every shot. They'll drive the crew down the one street that has been freshly paved and has full grocery stores. It's a battle of narratives. The Americans want to see signs of internal strain and military movement, and the Iranians want to show strength and civilian resilience. And the journalists are caught in the middle, trying to maintain their independence while being used by both sides.
It's a tightrope walk over a volcano. Let's look at some historical examples of this. During the Iraq War in 2003, we had the embedding model, which was very different. Journalists were part of the military units. They had protection, but they were also limited by where the unit went. But if you look at someone like Peter Arnett in Baghdad during the First Gulf War in 1991, that is a closer parallel. Arnett was criticized by many back home for staying in Baghdad while U.S. bombs were falling. People called him a mouthpiece for Saddam Hussein.
But his reporting from the ground gave a perspective that we wouldn't have had otherwise. He showed the civilian casualties. He showed the reality of the air campaign from the receiving end. It was controversial, but it was vital. And he had to use incredible OPSEC for the time. He was using a massive satellite phone that was a huge target. He had to be incredibly careful about where he set up that dish, because the Iraqis were looking for it, and the Americans were potentially targeting the signals.
It's amazing how much the tech has changed, but the fundamental risks remain the same. Whether it's a satellite dish in 1991 or an encrypted burst transmission in 2026, you are still a human being in a place where people are trying to kill each other. And the risk profile for a journalist has actually worsened. In the past, there was a general respect for the press as neutral observers. Today, in this hyperpolarized environment, the press is seen as just another combatant. If you are an American journalist, you are seen as an extension of American power, period.
That's a grim reality. So, if you are a listener at home watching these reports coming out of Tehran over the next few days, how should you be processing this? What is the Trust But Verifies protocol for conflict news?
First, you have to look at the constraints. If a reporter is standing in a beautiful square in Tehran and saying everything is normal, look at what is behind them. Is there a government minder just off camera? Are they only talking to people who seem to have pre-approved talking points? You have to audit the source. Ask yourself, what is the regime allowing them to see, and what are they being steered away from?
Right. We should be looking for the signs of state-imposed constraints. Are they being allowed to go to the hospitals? Are they being allowed to talk to the families of those who have been arrested? If the answer is no, then you are only getting a very thin slice of the truth. You also have to look for the hints. Often, conflict journalists use a kind of code. They might describe a situation in a way that sounds neutral to a censor, but carries a deeper meaning to someone who understands the context.
It's like reading between the lines of a Soviet-era newspaper. If a reporter says, "The atmosphere is remarkably quiet today," they might actually be saying that the streets are empty because of a crackdown. You have to be an active participant in consuming this news. You can't just let it wash over you. You have to ask, why am I being shown this right now?
And I think we also need to consider the future of this. As remote sensing gets better, as we have more high-resolution satellite data and AI-driven analysis of social media, Do we even need to send people into these high-risk zones anymore? If a satellite can tell us the price of eggs by looking at a sign in a market window, is the human risk still worth it?
That is the big question. Personally, I think the human element is still worth the cost. There is something about a human being on the ground, witnessing an event with their own eyes, that can't be replaced by an algorithm. A satellite can't hear the tone of a person's voice or feel the tension in a room. But the price we ask these people to pay is getting higher every year. We are moving into an era where individual journalists are being treated like strategic assets in a global conflict. It changes the nature of the job. It's no longer just about being a good writer or a good photographer. You have to be a survivor, a technician, and a bit of a diplomat all at once.
It's a lot to ask, but I'm glad they are there. Even with all the constraints and the propaganda, having an American crew in Tehran right now provides a window into a world that is otherwise completely closed to us. It's a dangerous, messy, imperfect window, but it's better than a brick wall.
I agree, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge the bravery it takes to get on that plane. Regardless of your politics or your view of the network, those individuals are putting their lives on the line to bring us information from the heart of the enemy. That deserves respect.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive, Herman. I think we covered a lot of ground on the technical and ethical realities of this situation. It's definitely something we'll be watching closely as their reporting starts to come in.
Definitely. And if you want to dig deeper into how these narratives are constructed, I really recommend going back and listening to episode 944. It provides a lot of the structural context for what we talked about today regarding the architecture of information.
And don't forget episode 895 for the intelligence side of things. It's all connected, especially here in the Middle East, where the lines between news, intelligence, and warfare are so incredibly blurred.
Before we wrap up, I just want to say, if you've been listening to my weird prompts for a while and you're enjoying these deep dives, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app or over on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and keeps us going.
Yeah, it really does. We love doing this, and your support means everything to us. You can find all our past episodes, including the ones we mentioned today, at myweirdprompts.com. There's an RSS feed there, and a contact form if you want to reach out to us.
We're always interested in what you think about these topics. This was a heavy one today, but it's the reality of the world we're living in 2026.
It certainly is. Well, thanks for joining us for this special look at the tradecraft of conflict journalism. I'm Corn Puppleberry.
And I'm Herman Poppleberry.
We'll see you next time on My Weird Prompts.
Stay safe out there and keep asking the weird questions.
So, Herman, be honest. If you were offered a spot on that crew to Tehran, would you take it?
Oh, in a heartbeat, Corn. I'd have my burner laptop packed before you could finish the question, but I think I'd want you there to handle the diplomacy while I hid in the hotel room analyzing the signal intercepts.
Fair enough. I'll stick to the Jerusalem studio for now, thank you very much. I prefer my adrenaline in small, podcast-sized doses.
Smart man. Probably why you're the older brother.
All right, that's a wrap. Thanks again, everyone.
Until next time.
I wonder if they'll actually let them see anything beyond the usual tourist spots. I mean, the IRGC isn't exactly known for their transparency.
Probably not, but even the tourist spots tell a story right now. If the shops are empty or the people look terrified, you can't hide that with a press pass.
Oh, true. It's the unintended information that's often the most valuable.
Always is. That's the secret to good intelligence and good journalism.
Well said. We'll be watching.
We certainly will.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We'll be back soon with another one.
Take care, everyone.
Peace.
Egg out.
Wait, did we mention the website?
Yeah, myweirdprompts.com. We got it.
Good. Just making sure. My brain is still on that CNN story.
It's a lot to process. We'll talk more about it at dinner.
Sounds good. Let's go see what Daniel's cooking.
Hopefully something better than the military rations they're probably eating in Tehran right now.
One can hope. See ya!
Bye.
Actually, one last thing. I was reading about those IMS eye catches you mentioned. Did you know the latest models can actually push silent SMS messages to a phone to force it to ping its location without the user ever knowing?
Oh yeah, the stealth ping. It's a classic move. They can even use it to drain your battery faster if they want to force you to plug your phone into a compromised charging station.
That is terrifying. Note to self, never use a public USB port in a hostile country.
Never use a public USB port anywhere, Corn. That's OPSEC 101.
Point taken. All right, now we're really done.
See you at dinner.
Later?
Bye.
One more thing. Just kidding. Let's go.
You're impossible.
I know. It's part of the charm.
Whatever you say, brother.
Thanks for listening, everyone. For real this time.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show. My weird prompts